Welcome and thank you for joining the conversation today. We are glad that each of you are with us. And as always, we imagine those of you who are listening, whether you are trying to listen in between carpool or you're on your walk or doing household chores, we're just grateful that you are taking the time to join us and to hopefully walk away with some validation today, especially in the topic that we're going to be covering. We're going to be talking about the hidden pieces of grief. I think we've done some podcasts, Alana, on grief. I think we've talked about the main principles of grief, talked a lot about David Kessler, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and those 6 stages of grief. But oftentimes there's some other pieces around grief due to betrayal that don't get talked about. So we're going to touch on some of those today, things that oftentimes we don't name that still fall under grief. We're going to just dive right into it. And one of the first things that oftentimes doesn't get named or talked about when we discuss grief is grieving the future that may never be, grieving the dream that you had in your mind of when you got married. It feels like everything is lost. It feels like everything is not going to be the same. In a lot of aspects, it's not going to be the same, whether you stay together or not. There are a lot of things to grieve here. And many of you who have been and experienced betrayal are mourning the life that you had in your mind. The plan, the blueprint, whatever you want to call it, you had this in your mind, in your heart. There's a lot of different pieces that many of you might be grieving around this.
This one is where I think of the image of the puzzle, where you have up on your wall this portrait of your family and your life. Then not only does that get shattered into a million pieces, where I have no idea what it's going to look like in the future when I did have an idea, even I realized that the picture that I had on my wall is not what I thought it was.
Right.
Now, all of a sudden, I have all these pieces sitting in front of me that are supposed to fit in this picture that I don't know how or where or when they fit in. So it's almost this twofold process. It's the future. I now don't even know what that looks like. But also, depending on where you're at in your healing, I don't know what the past looks like.
Right.
And then the confusion that brings in the present and the grief around all of that. So their grief at its core is a mourning and a loss. And so there's this loss of what I thought and loss of what I thought with the past and loss of what I thought my future would look like.
It's really, really heavy. If you haven't listened to the episode I did on reality fragmentation, go back and listen to it. That's what's coming to mind as you're talking. Fragmented piece of what was, and we're realizing it wasn't. And so it's all just a big pile of doo-doo right now. And you're trying to pick up one piece at a time and put it together. And it's a process. I was just speaking to a client this morning, and she is in the process of separation and really holding herself hostage to grief because of this right here, where she thinks she should be somewhere other than where she's at. Like, I've been doing this a year, I should be over this by now. But the impact of what's happening to her from the partner is still happening presently today. Sometimes this is what's hidden in grief, is that it's often even longer because of the re-injury that a lot of our clients are experiencing too. But anyways, I just think with all of that being said, what's coming to what I want to share with that is be kind and give yourself grace in the timing, because there's so many pieces to put together. This isn't a quick process. And I know a lot of you are not going to like that I just said that. But if it was, if we felt everything, you and I were just saying this right before we hit record, we felt everything all at once to the intensity, we wouldn't survive it. So I believe in a graceful manner,
The body is wisdom.
the body is wisdom, we process it in chunks. And so grief around this piece, with what you were saying too, Alana, the past, the present, the today, is going to all come in chunks.
Okay, so here's a good example of that. I was living in Las Vegas when the shooting happened on October 1st. And when that first happened, they came and they said, okay, we need crisis counselors who are going to help with the shooting. And people stepped up, and there was lots of counselors who stepped up. But I remember a colleague of mine, she said, while this is important during this crisis stage, a year from now is where we're going to see the real trauma work and the deep grief and the true impacts of it. And I watched for that. And a year later, that was very accurate. And it wasn't to the date, right? There were some before and some after, some who went, oh my gosh, it's been a year. Why am I having issues? And there are some who their bodies started ramping up 2 months before October 1st.
Yeah.
But it wasn't time initially. There was that shock period.
Mhm.
There was that restabilization. And then their body was ready to dive in and do that grief and mourning and trauma work. And I think about even with abscess, those stages of healing. Stage 1 is that crisis stage where it is about safety and stability. Once we get through that into stage 2,
Dang it.
that's where we really start the deep grief and mourning. And so a lot of people will think, oh my gosh, like I'm 6 months in and I'm doing worse now than I was 4 months ago. Like I'm doing it wrong. What's wrong with me? And it's like, no, 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 no. Nothing is wrong with you. You are just ready for that deeper level of healing. And as
Mhm.
confusing as that may be, it's actually a sign of your growth and your healing.
It really is. It really is. I know we've talked about this so many times, but yes, 10 years ago, I went to my new therapist and I said, I'm ready to process sexual trauma. And my body's like, we're not. It wasn't until 7 years later that my body's like, be. So your body knows when it's ready, which is why I'm always preaching till I'm blue in the face. Like, trust your body, listen to your body in your healing process. It's going to happen in stages. The other thing that I think falls under this category is when grief is masquerading indecision or stuckness. A lot of our partners who've been betrayed who feel like, well, I don't know what to do. I haven't grieved what I thought I had, where we're in limbo, just feeling stuck, feeling in the in between. Oftentimes we categorize that, or professionals categorize that as we're afraid to move forward. And this is where grief can be hidden. It's oftentimes we are still in grief and we're mourning or needing to mourn and we're avoiding mourning that other level. We can be stuck in there. I look at it like a cognitive dissonance where you're stuck in between the two truths or two realities. That's what cognitive dissonance is. And I personally feel like grief is what moves you out of that cognitive dissonance. It's grief is an emotional process, right? And so when we feel stuck holding two truths, like you were saying earlier, the past, the future, a lot of the reality fragmentation, and we feel stuck in the middle in between, when we allow the emotional process of grief to be experienced, I feel like that's what can help you move out of that cognitive dissonance, this stuck place.
Yeah, because grief inherently, when you allow it and let it move through you, it does move you through your healing. And going back to the stages of grief where you have denial and anger and sadness, and brain's not working to think of all of them at the top of my head.
Bargaining,
Thank
depression.
you. Yeah. When you have these different stages, if you dig your heels in and say, like, well, I'm not going to do anger, I'm not going to do anger, you won't be able to move forward.
Uh-uh.
And so it's so interesting to me tying this indecision to it, because I sat in indecision for a long time. And you had mentioned earlier, Amy, that that indecision almost can be a protection from the grieving and from feeling that pain. And I hadn't thought of it that way. And I was like, oh, yes. Because sometimes when we know that there's this big, I like to use the analogy of like a floodgate, and there's this dam. And we know behind the dam, there's all of this built up. And if I remove the dam, our brain's like, no, it's going to flood everything. So we're just going to keep that dam in place because I need to just not fall apart.
Mhm.
So we're just going to keep that shut. This is all subconscious, right? But that indecision can keep that gate shut and give you almost a false sense of control. It's not the
Or
right
that
way.
everything is, quote, okay, even.
Mhm, mhm. And so
Yeah.
even though you're annoyed with the indecision and you're annoyed that you're feeling stuck, you're not falling apart and out of control. And so really just I'm going to say if this is hitting something in you and just check in with your body. This is causing a little tingling in your chest or some movement. That might be just something to look at. Is there a part of me that is resisting grieving or making a decision because of the things that it's going to cause me to feel if I do one way or the other?
Yeah. And it's interesting because I feel like grief is a full body experience. And so with your floodgate, like that's really what we're trying to resist is the full body experience. But what I have found and continue to find when in my own healing, but when I work with clients, is that when we really allow it to be a full embodied experience, it's not as bad as we anticipate, which is why I love modalities like brain spotting because my mentor who just explained this to me years ago when I was doing my certification, she's like, it's like a fire hose. And sometimes we're worried about if we open that floodgate, we're going to fire hose other people or ourselves. And it's just going to spray out. And that image of like a firefighter holding onto the hose and he's getting yanked around with it. Like that is the image that I know I had with this. So I'm just going to put all the clamps on. Well, sometimes when we use these healing modalities like brain spotting, we put some clamps on the hose and we can remove one of those clamps and let it just spray out a little bit and release and do some processing. And then we can release another clamp and we're not spraying all over the place. I want to give you hope that there are ways to process with a professional to help it not feel like that. And those clamps are getting into your body and being in touch with it and connecting. It's the disconnect that makes the dam.
Mhm,
Oh
mhm.
gosh. So I love that analogy you gave because very relatable.
Well, and I'll just say in our next episode, we're going to dive deeper into allowing yourself to move through the grieving without feeling like it completely overwhelms you, because that's something that I really want to slow down and walk you through and support you through, because I will see clients pendulum swing between creating that dam and then just knocking it down instead of letting open a little floodgate. They knock it down and they are drowning in it. And so then quickly we build the dam back up and they do this pendulum swing between the two. So hang
Yeah,
with us
that's
because
going to
we'll
be
go
a
into slowing that down.
for sure.
We're going to take a really fast break and tell you about some of the things coming up at Choose.
Hey friends, it's Hallie Roderick here, and I wanted to personally invite you to an incredible opportunity coming up this summer. From July 8th to 11th, Luke Gordon and I will be co-facilitating a Help Her Heal intensive for men in Spanish Fork, Utah. And if you're a man who's serious about rebuilding trust, creating emotional safety, and doing the deep work of repair after betrayal, this space is created specifically for you. This 4-day intensive is not a lecture series. It's a deeply experiential process designed to help you feel the shift, not just understand it intellectually. Together, we'll explore powerful tools and practices to help you develop real empathy, shame resiliency, and a clear understanding of betrayal trauma so you can begin to show up as a safe, trustworthy partner again. You'll also have the opportunity to connect with other men who are on the same path, men also committed to growth, their integrity, doing the hard work, and the beautiful work of relationship repair. So, whether you're just beginning this process or you're well on your way, this intensive can be a powerful next step in your journey towards healing. So, if you're ready to move forward, we'd love to have you join us. So, to learn more or to reserve your spot, check out the show notes where you'll find a link to reach out to our office. So, let's do this work together. Hope to see you in Utah.
Okay. And now back to the episode.
Okay, the next one that often is a hidden grief piece that we don't look at is the grief of losing yourself. And
Mhm.
this one hits hard for me because it really was a shock the more I moved away from that unhealthy space, realizing just how much I had moved away from myself. And so grieving the version of yourself that you thought you were, grieving the version of yourself that you didn't know, grieving the version of, and I'll speak for myself, the self that I thought I trusted, the one that stayed for 18 years. And I remember being really mad at myself, blaming myself, wondering, why did I stay? Why did I choose this person? Look at how much pain and hurt he's causing me and my children. This one can be one that we often miss to grieve.
I'll put in there even too is time. I
Mm.
see a lot of that, and I'll see women or people feel like time lost.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, I've lost 10 years of my life to this marriage, or I've lost 20 years or however many years. And or like the time that I have left, like, look how I have to start over, or our relationship. If we've had 30 years of this and we only get however many years left in this life together. So that time lost is another piece I see of like the grieving of losing self, because it's the time that yourself has had or has not had.
Yeah. I see a lot of shame get brought into that if we run wild, if we let our brain run wild with it. So just have some compassion.
Mm.
Mm. You chose what you chose with the information you had at the time. And this is why I call it abuse, because you were kept from information that didn't give you the choice to choose. And so you made the choice with what you knew. Information was kept from you that you didn't know about. And that limited your agency. And when you have agency taken from you or limited, I call that abusive behavior through different ways of communicating, gaslighting, deceiving, deflecting. So give yourself some compassion. You did the best that you could with what you knew. But that loss of self, gosh, we could probably do a whole episode on that one too. But again, this falls under the hidden faces of grief we often don't look at and see.
Well, and when we grieve the loss of self, it allows us to move into a place where we can begin to reclaim ourself.
Mm-hmm.
But if we don't grieve the loss, if we try to just be like, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, it really doesn't allow you to embody that full reclaiming. And that word to me, reclaiming, is such an empowering word.
Yep.
It's a stepping into your power and reclaiming your life and your choices and your agency and those
And
parts
your
of you.
love. This
Yeah,
is
and you get to
something that
own
was,
it.
yeah, it was hard for me to reclaim the fact that I am a trustworthy, trusting, loving person. I hated that about myself for a while because it, quote, caused me pain and it was taken advantage of. And maybe I shouldn't have loved and I'm too trusting and all the things. And so just honoring that, no, I did show up in that relationship loving and kind and compassionate and forgiving and whatever, rather than the shame part of I'm dumb and I'm naive and I'm stupid and I'm too trusting, where I lived for a while. And so part of me reclaiming that, again, I agree, it's a really empowering word, is taking back how I showed up at that time with what I knew. No, I chose to love despite having been lied to, right? And not knowing that I was being lied to, I still showed up and made great memories. I get to keep those. So there's a lot of reclamation that can be had here. But to your point, we can't do that unless we grieve the part of us that didn't know and
Mhm,
have compassion that it didn't know.
mhm.
The other piece here that sometimes gets missed in grief, and especially for those of you who are still in the relationship, grieving while in the relationship, going back to the APSAX model, Alana, phase 2 comes to mind. The couple grieving comes to mind too, but that oftentimes gets missed where we don't grieve as a couple. But those of you who are still in the relationship, it can be where the person is physically present, but emotionally, morally gone.
Mhm.
They aren't doing their work, or they're not where we need them to be at the time, yet we're making the decision to still choose to stay. I think there's some missed grief that can happen there as well.
Yeah, clients come to mind. And I say clients because I'm adding a whole bunch together who have had similar experiences. But being in couples therapy and investing in that work and going and seeing that their partner actually isn't invested and that they're putting their heart and soul into it alone, and the deep pain and grief that comes from that. And I've had some who walk towards divorce, and I've had some who just accept what is and still choose to stay. And in both cases, there is that grief of, I am investing and my partner is not. And so that piece, and I remember when I was running groups, seeing that of that unique pain and grief for those women who have partners who don't choose to do the work. And I like using the word grief attached to this instead of just anger or frustration, because grief encompasses so much more. And again, as part of grief is getting to that place of acceptance, which we will talk about in 2 episodes around grief and acceptance. But getting to that place of acceptance of what is and what is reality allows you then to make empowered decisions for yourself of what your next steps are.
Yeah.
But if we don't go through the grief, then we miss an important information.
Or
Yeah.
we start controlling, fighting against the reality, or putting our head in the sand and denying the reality of it. This is what we're talking about, the grief that gets missed. And it gets missed when we're trying to control the other person or the outcome and not seeing the reality of it. We don't want to accept it. And I get that. Again, we're talking more about that. But yeah, that's one way that I see grief getting missed sometimes. And then the other one is delayed grief, and understandable, where we go into that survival mode as a betrayed partner. We don't want to start grieving. Oftentimes, I guess this kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier, too. I think there's stages and chunks. So survival mode is the stage 1. We're not in a place to grieve because we're still trying to survive. And if we normalize or accept any of the reality, like you said earlier, that floodgate might open. And so there is an element of delayed grief where we aren't going to start that process just yet. I think just normalizing that. There's so many of you that listen to this podcast. And so often we're trying to meet all of you in these different stages where you're at. This one, I think, is for those of you who are, like you said, in that phase 1, still in shock, in survival, still wrapping your head around the reality, trying to get your footing underneath you. Let this be a message of it's okay to delay grief when you are in survival mode right now. Just know that it's coming and have some acceptance around that and compassion around that right now.
Well, and the analogy I'll use with this one is the person who is in the really bad car accident and they go to the hospital and they end up having to be in the hospital for months. And they've been in the hospital for like a month, and then all of a sudden they are overcome by this immense pain in their legs and they start freaking out. So they start pushing the call button and calling the doctor, and they're like, what is wrong with me? Like my legs feel like they are like falling off. They hurt so bad. And the doctor says to the individual, this is good because you have had so many injuries in your back and with your internal organs and with your legs that we have just had to get you stabilized. And now your body is allowing you to feel the full extent of your injuries. So this means you're healing because you have healed enough and stabilized enough for your body to allow your brain to register the full extent of your healing. And I see the same thing happen emotionally with individuals. So yeah, where you say like normalizing that, the why am I falling apart now? Your body knows the wisdom of the body in trusting that process. And so it can feel confusing, but the amount of individuals I worked with who have heard that analogy and been like, oh my gosh, yes. And what's so interesting to me, even though I've watched it time and time again, is when you are able to identify what's happening, there is this relief that comes that it's like, hey, okay, I'm not crazy. That makes sense. And then I can handle it. It's the confusion of not knowing and worrying that I'm going backwards or worrying that something's wrong with me that amplifies the pain. So when we can recognize it, name it for what it is, then all of a sudden we go, okay, this is part of healing. I can do this. And it allows us to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that analogy too. So the last one that I think is worth mentioning here, oh, this one's a tough one, but grieving hope, letting go ties in with the one we talked about earlier, but grieving hope when you are hoping that they will change or hoping that they will finally see what they've done or hoping that they will get it, hoping that they will understand the pain, see the pain, validate the pain, even feel the pain that they have caused you. I see this often, often with betrayed partners when, again, perhaps the partner isn't doing the work, the healing work, putting in the time, cultivating empathy.
Well, and I want to slow this one down because I know for some of you right now, this is stretching your brain
Yeah.
because hope is really important to keep during your healing process. But I want you to notice what Amie just said there. The hope that she's talking about of letting go is the hope of what you want to happen for them.
Right. Not the reality.
The hope that you get to hold on to is the hope that healing can happen and that you can heal and you can be whole and you can move forward. And that hope can carry you forward. Letting go of the hope that they will change, the way or the reason I see individuals get so stuck here is they get so caught up in this hope that they stop seeing reality and they stop being in acceptance of what is today. And so it almost, they hold on to this hope in a way that gives them a false sense of reality and a false sense of security. And that's when it becomes really problematic. And it then hinders and delays your own healing and your own growth. And so to be able to let go of that doesn't mean that there isn't going to be a part of you that's still like, yes, that would be wonderful if they change. And I don't have to hold on to that for my safety, my survival, me being okay. I can let go of that. I can let them make their own choices. And then with what choices they make, that gives me the information of what I need to do today in my reality.
Yeah.
And oh, that's a hard one.
Oh, it's so, so hard. I think just as we wrap up, I see this a lot and I remember thinking that grief is a detour. It's detouring me. It's taking me away from where I want to be.
Mm,
And what I want to help reframe is that it's not a detour. It's like I said, when we allow grief to be a emotional process that we feel, that we embody, it moves us forward. It moves us out of cognitive dissonance. It moves us out of unhealthy. It's moving us out of something. It is not deterring you from something that I know you all want. Just reframing that in your mind, going back to that word you use, reclaim, it really is the path that you, your higher self, takes to reclaim what was lost and remember what that is without the illusion that I think sometimes is hidden. And this is all these things that we're talking about today, the hidden grief. We can get sucked up into the illusion part. So it isn't a detour. It's proof that you loved. It's proof that you dreamed, that you believed. And it doesn't have to be the end of your story.
what a beautiful way to end. I'm not going to add to that. That was just beautiful. So, as always, thank you for hanging out with us this week. We send you love in your healing journey, and we look forward to seeing you all next week. I'd love to share with you what's upcoming, and we have something really unique coming up in June. So, for those of you who are in a healing profession who is helping take care of other people, therapists, coaches, especially, but even if you're a nurse working in the medical field, if you spend your time catering to everyone else and holding their pain and helping them through their hard, we have an intensive just for you. This is called Heal the Healer. And of Oh, well, I love all my intensives, but this one holds such a special place in my heart because in Heal the Healer, it's where the healer gets to come and for a moment set everything down and let you be taken care of. And this isn't where you're going to come do a ton of workshops and lots of learning and have to stretch your brain. It's just where you get to come relax. You get to kick your feet up and have other professionals there ready to take care of you and cater to you. We have a gorgeous lodge house resort property that's all ours that has pools and saunas and ponds and paths and trails, and it's tucked in the Wasatch Mountains. We have a gorgeous place to stay. All of your meals are included. Activities are included. There'll be time for fun if you want to participate in that, and also time for downtime and rest. And best of all, you get that connection with other strong women who are holding it all together for somebody else and who are ready to be taken care of. So invest in you. Take care of you. We would love to have you there. I would love to hang out with you and come with us in June to Heal the Healer.